experiences and skill sets that they want to share with you. We work with folks that are in all stages, whether you're trying to decide if you should start a small business, all the way up to ready to exit or sell. So we work with everyone on many, many different topics. So I strongly encourage you to reach out and get a mentor. So a beginning session, if you've never had a mentor before, they're going to want to learn about you. They're going to know about your goals and your challenges, and they're going to work with you to come up with a plan to be successful. And as you work through and progress and change, they'll invite other mentors to make sure that you're getting all the information that you need. So the next question is logically, how do I get that mentor? So there are multiple ways on the website to get mentors. I think the easiest is probably just to go to the score.org website, put in your zip code into the match me by zip code box, and that will attach you to the chapter that's nearest you. We'll ask you a couple quick questions, and that information is used to match you to the appropriate mentor. So I do have two guests with us today. I want to say too, if we can put questions that you might have along the way into the Q&A, that way I can keep track of questions and make sure we answer as many as possible. That's helpful to me. And we will be sending out a follow-up email after with templates and how to, different information, contacts for the bank as well. So we do have, like I said, I mentioned two representatives from Middlesex Savings Bank with us today. We have David Bennett and Jeff Homoliski. And I'm going to I'm not sure who's doing the speaking today, but I'm going to let you go ahead. And can you tell us a little bit about Middlesex and why you think this topic is so important?
Sure. Thank you, Teresa, and thanks to SCORE for putting the presentation on today. So folks that don't know, Middlesex Savings is a $6 billion mutual bank, headquartered in Massachusetts, focused primarily in Eastern and Central Mass, specifically Metro West and Worcester counties. We've just celebrated our 190th birthday this week, actually, so we've been at this for 190 years. Dave Bennett heads up our business banking division. Dave, and his team of business bankers bring years of experience to the table, in many cases, decades of experience to the table, and have long-standing relationships with all our customers that we work with, oftentimes serving as not only their banker, but as a trusted advisor. So I encourage you to connect with someone at Middlesex, Dave, or his team when the time's appropriate. I will thank SCORE again. I turn it back over to Mark for our presentation.
Okay. Let me pull up. Everybody see my PowerPoint?
Looks great.
Okay. Yep. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Mark Goldberg, and I am a mentor at SCORE Cape Cod and the Islands. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about planning, business planning. Everybody that goes to any kind of a workshop or webinar takes away at least one thing. And about 25 years ago, I went to a workshop out in California where Peter Johnson was talking about strategic planning for businesses. And he left me with this thought. And this thought is that accuracy before momentum. And when you think about business planning, you need to think in terms of crawling first, then walking, then running. So think in terms of accuracy of what you're doing before you start running. So if you walk away with one thought, this is the thought I would like you to walk away with. In the meantime, what I'd like to do is share with you some thoughts about a concept that we have been using now for about 5 or 6 years, and we modify it periodically based upon the needs we see of our clients. But for the most part, we keep the approach pretty straightforward. So when you think about a business plan, I want you to think about the fact that it's a means to communicate. It's a means to communicate to your employees, to your investors, to your bankers, to people who have an interest in what it is you're doing. It's also a means as a guide. Now, when I think about a plan, I think about a plan that gives strategic direction to the organization. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example throughout this, but my wife and I owned a trade show marketing company for almost 30 years. We improved performance of exhibitors and marketers who utilized events through training their staff how to transition skills and measuring their results. We used to have a one-page plan that we utilized throughout our 30 years. Every quarter we sat down and reviewed it. It became a guide for us that allowed us to understand the strategic direction of our organization. It helped us with decision making. Most small businesses end up being opportunistic to some extent. And many times somebody would come to us, and normally it'd be a client, and ask us to do something that was not in our mainstream. And we used our business plan to sort out and help decide whether we stay the course or meet the needs of our client. It helped with resource management. It helped with financial planning. It also provided us with a way to measure our performance. We used to set an objective of how many new clients we would generate each year, because our clients did not come back to us year after year. They may skip a year and come back. So we always had to be filling the funnel. It also helped us understand the market, because we were in a constantly changing dynamic market in trade shows and events. It also helped us become more efficient and manage the business. So a business plan in general helps you manage what it is you're doing. So what you're trying to do is it answers two questions. One, where do you want to go? And two, how are you going to get there? And when you do that, you're able to develop strategies and tactics that enable you to harness the resources you have and set your objectives so that you can move forward. Now, if you go back to Marketing 101, the strategies are what you're going to do to achieve your objectives, and the tactics are how are you going to achieve the strategies. So they're very straightforward, and we'll use some examples as we go through today. Now, when you think about it, a business plan is only as long as it is essential to convey the message that you need to convey. If you're looking for funding, you may have to have a more extensive plan because of the financial projections that you're going to have to include. And because of the detail you may have to include on your team and your team's experience and how you're going to manage the business and what your competitive situation is. But many times it can be as short as one page. And today we're going to talk about the one-page business plan through the business model canvas. Now, one of the things you want to think about is a business plan is a living document. It's not something that you execute, put it on the shelf, and when it's time to execute it again or update it, you pull it out. It's something that should be available to you on a constant basis that you always are reviewing to make sure that the assumptions you've made relative to the planning you've done remain the same. I just finished working on an article for the Cape Cod Times, which appears every Sunday, on small businesses managing in this turmoil of a market that we're in. So one of the things you want to do is you always want to be tuned in to the environmental factors that impact your business. You want to be tuned into what is occurring where you may have to make a pivot. So it's a living document that you should always be updating, whether it be a full-blown business plan that you used for funding, or if it's a business model canvas. Now, there's a number of templates out there that you can use if you need to do a full-blown business plan. The Small Business Administration has one, SCORE has one, most banks have them. But the best one, I think, to start with is the one produced by Southeast Economic Development Corporation. Why? Because if you go on that website and look at their template, it asks specific questions of you in each of the areas, whether it be description of your business or description of your team or your competitive analysis, so that it gives you a guide as to how to write the business plan. And it's very easy to get to. You go to their website, you go to resources, which has a drop down, and the template is in the drop down. Now, when we talk about Business Model Canvas, what I want you to think about is this is a tactical tool. This is a tool that you can use whether you're in business and growing your business, you're in business and you have an issue that you're trying to address relative to customer extension or expansion. So it's a tactical tool. It's a tool that was designed by Alexander Osterwalder in Europe, and it was designed around high tech, but it is absolutely applicable to any kind of business. I worked with a group yesterday that's working on developing a retail establishment. I worked on with somebody who's doing manufacturing. I used this with somebody who is opening a kennel. So what you want to do is you want to think in terms of it's a tactical tool you can use to apply to your business. It's also a great tool for brainstorming. Now, the best way to look at business planning is really to think outside the box. And you can use this tool for brainstorming. So it's a great way to also create the framework around which you are going to use for a broader business plan if you need to go to see David or Jeff for funding. So it's a great way to start. When you think about the Business Model Canvas, it's a holistic approach to looking at your business, but in a one-page snapshot. It helps you visualize all the different elements from your customers, to your channels of sales, to your activities, to your partners, to your strategic alliances, to your costs or revenue streams. It allows you to see the whole thing in front of you, which makes it very adaptable to looking at variations of your model. It's simple, it's clear, it's easy to understand, and it's easy to modify because all you have to do is line out something you find did not fulfill its assumption when you validate. So it's easy to understand and easy to use. It's adaptable. So if you assume that one of your target markets are women 18 to 32, and you find out that is not the case, it's really 30 to 45, you can just line it out and adapt to the new description. It focuses on customer value. Why? Because as you'll see, it starts with the value proposition. What are you offering to your customer segment to solve their problems? So it's customer focused. It also supports the strategic discussion. What takes place beyond where you are today, beyond this year and next year? What is the next step? Where are you going and how are you going to get there? It also creates a prioritization. And that's one of the things that we find in developing businesses and growing businesses is establishing what's really urgent and what's important so that you can focus on what you really need to get done. And many times we work on those things that are easiest to do, that easiest for us to do, not what's really urgent to get done in order to accomplish the task. And lastly, it puts a focus on the financial aspects. Where are you going to get your funds, your revenue streams, and where are you going to use your funds? What's your cost base? So that you can look at the various elements and see how they all fit together. Now, the Business Model Canvas has 9 blocks, and it starts in the middle with, what do you do? Now, this is not boarding dogs and cats. This is providing an environment that's safe and convenient for you. That's the value. So it's the value proposition where you start, because each one of us that's in business looks at our business as a solution to somebody's issues. Secondly, who are you going to help? Who has the problem? Who are you going to work with? Who's going to be your customer? Who's going to generate the revenue for you? Then, how are you going to reach them? And this is a big issue. You might have something people need. You might have people out there that need it, but they don't know that you're out there, that you're there. So how are you going to communicate with them? What's your channels of sales? What's your channels of communications? How are you going to distribute? And then we look at, how do you interact with them? What are your resources? What are your activities? What are your partners? So we're going to look at each one of these elements as we go through, so you have an understanding of how to utilize this tool that is so adaptable and so readily available. So the first question is value proposition. So what do you deliver? What is it that you are delivering to your customer segment? So what we delivered is prepared staff. What we prepared is the potential for return on their exhibiting investment, because they had a pain, and that is they are devoting dollars out of their marketing budget to go to a trade show or an event, and they needed to show a return. So what you design your organization around is, what's your value proposition? So what's so compelling about what you offer? What is it that differentiates you from others? And that's how people buy, by the way. They buy out of differentiation. So what are you doing for them? What problems do they have? What needs do they have? What wants and desires do they have that you can solve for them? And you can do it through your competitive advantage. Now, if you go back again to Marketing 101, Philip Kotler said to us, competitive advantage is that place that you reside in the buyer's mind that gives you no suitable substitute. So when I think about a restaurant where I want to go get veal Parmesan sub, I think of, first thing that comes to mind is Paradise Pizza. Why? It's close, it's convenient, it's reasonably priced, and good food. They have a competitive advantage over Dennis Port's Pizza or Brothers Pizza or Bass River Pizza, because they are positioned in my mind. So when you think about your value proposition, how do you reside in the mind of a buyer so they see there is no suitable substitute for you? Now, graphically, if you look at me right now, I have a pain. That pain is I'm hungry. What I'm looking for is a pain reliever. Well, Joey over at Paradise Pizza has specials today for $9.95 for veal Parmesan subs. He then becomes my gain, because he has solved a problem for me, and that is hunger. Very straightforward. So what you want to think about is, when you think about your customer base, what are their needs, their wants, their desires, and how can you fulfill them with your products and services? So that when you offer that, they see the differentiation in your offer versus others. Now, when we think about people like Planet Fitness, their value proposition is different for the different types of customers they have. For their regular gym users, they align with fitness goals. For casual gym users, they cater to their flexibility and convenience. I can walk in, walk for 20 minutes, do some sit-ups, do some stretches, and leave. First-time gym users, they help them start on their journey. They'll take you through and show you all of the different pieces of equipment and how to use them. So when you think in terms of your value proposition, it's what need, want, or desire are you fulfilling? Secondly, your customer segments. For whom are you creating this value? And who do your customers relate to? And it may be more than one. In our business, the trade show manager was one. The event manager was one. The sales and marketing manager was another because they held the purse strings. And the owner of the business or the general manager of business was a fourth. So you have to look at, many times it's a multi-tier sale. It's a multi-tier satisfaction because the value proposition for an exhibit manager may be different than for the marketing and sales vice president or the owner of the business. So you need to look at these individually. So what you have to ask yourself is, what do your customers think, feel, or do? How do they buy? What is it that causes them to buy? What motivates me to take my dog to one kennel over another kennel? Why would I pick one copywriter over another copywriter? Why would I utilize one trucking company to warehouse my product over another? Now, your customers have all kinds of demographics you have to consider. So when you think in terms of your value proposition, you got to look at the different customers and their demographics. It may be geographic. Here on the Cape, we look at upper, mid Cape, lower Cape, outer Cape, because many customers won't go more than a mile, one way or another, to satisfy their needs. You have to look at social. You have to look at age. I had a client once that made clothing for young adult women, 14 to 20. Well, the 14 to 20-year-old was the customer segment, but you know what? Their mother was also a customer segment, and they had a different value proposition, each one of them. So you need to look at your customer and their demographics to understand who it is you are satisfying and how they integrate and accept and utilize your value proposition. Now, when you look at Planet Fitness again, you've got the regular gym users, the casual gym users, and the first timers. They don't have advertisers for the most part. So you've got 3 levels of customer segments, and each one of these customer segments are looking for something different from you in the way of your value proposition. Now, once we decided what the value proposition is and we looked at who are our customers, we have to ask ourselves, how do we reach them? There used to be a saying that the average adult receives 2,000 to 2,500 marketing messages every single day. I read recently that we are now receiving over 5,000 marketing messages every single day. We are being bombarded with messages from people. We get them through email, we get them through social media, we get them through the newspaper, if we get a newspaper, we get them through postcards, we get them through word of mouth, we get them through billboards, signs. So what you want to think about is, if you know and understand your customer segments, one of the things you have to know about them is, where do they get their information? How do they get their information so that they can make decisions? Now, I used to get the Cape Cod Times paper. I loved it. I loved sitting at the table in the morning and reading the paper, drinking my coffee. I could read the front section. My wife could read the sports section. You know, it was great. Now we found out they can't find our driveway. We live down a 200-foot driveway. So they'd leave it in the street. So we said, okay, we're going digital. You know what that did? I never look at ads anymore. I read the articles. I look at the headlines. If the headlines appeals to me, I read the article. I never see the ads. When I had the newspaper, the paper was in front of me. I saw the whole page. I could see that Anderson Windows, I could see Gutter Monkey, I could see all the other people out there, the painters and the landscapers. So you've got to ask your customers, how do they get their information? Otherwise, it's a shot in the dark. And part of business planning is making sure that your message is actually getting received by your customers and that they are taking action. That call to action you are giving, that they are actually taking advantage of that. So understanding how they get their information. For example, if you're in B2B, you want to be on LinkedIn. If you put everything you have on Facebook, it's not going to get to B2B. It's a B2C or a C2C. So what you want to think about is, where do you need to be so that they get your message and receive the information you want them to receive? Well, when you go back to Planet Fitness, they're a franchise model. So they communicate with me. I pay them $39, I have $10 a month, and I virtually get no messaging from them. I just show up, do my card, do my thing. 45 minutes every day, 5 days a week. They don't have to communicate with me. How do they communicate with new people is in their model, and that is their online platforms. Because they know that I look at Facebook. Why? Because I want to keep up with my grandsons. So they know they can communicate with me. So what you want to do is understand how your customers get their information so you can be where they are. Now, accuracy before momentum is point number one you need to remember. Point number two is stop in your planning and validate it. Everything so far you have done is an assumption. Now, I don't know how many of you on here have ever been in the military, but my first week in the military, they defined what assumption was. And most of the time, an assumption is the first step in making a mistake, unless you validate the assumption. So what I want you to think about is, you take your value proposition, you go to your customer segments, you ask them about their channels, and you validate that your assumptions are right. And when you do that, then you can move forward. If you find that your assumptions weren't correct, then you go back and modify your value proposition. You modify how you define your customer segments. Or you modify the channels, because people say, well, I don't go on LinkedIn. So find out where they go so that you can communicate with them. So validation is a very important part of this process. Now, what you want to think about is, what's the relationship that you want with your customers? Now, I'm going to use my old bank in Westboro as an example. My wife and I ran this business for almost 30 years. 20 of those years, we banked with the same bank. They decided that the relationship they want with me is, they like the fact that I come in and make my deposits. This was before you could do it through the ATM. And then whenever I came in, it was, hey, Mark, how's business? So they wanted a casual relationship with me so that we could have a dialogue. The manager always came out of his office and spent time. What's going on in your business? Where'd you go this week? Who were your customers? Because they knew that my wife and I both traveled to trade shows and events, so they kept up with what we were doing. Once a year, they sat down with our business plan and said, okay, what can we do to help grow your business? So they understood the kind of customer relationship they wanted with me. And what I wanted with them was being available when I wanted to have a conversation. So what you want to think about is, what kind of relationship do you want with your customers? How do you acquire your customers? How do you retain your customers? How do you grow your customer base? Well, we all know that acquiring new customers is much more expensive than retaining and growing customers. So how do you get your new customers? How do you find leads to your customers? Then what do you do to make sure they stick with you and that they start buying more from you than they did yesterday? That they do more with you. So by understanding the relationship you want with them, kind of gives you a guide of how you want to work with them. So the customer relationship is very, very important as it relates to your value proposition. Because you're constantly testing, are you providing them fulfillment for their need, want, or desire? Now, when you think about Planet Fitness, they're self-service. And they are a supportive environment. So their relationship is, I go in, I do my thing, and other than a greeting at the desk, I don't really see anybody there. And when I leave, they say, have a great day. I feel good about coming. I feel good about going. And if I have an issue, I'll tell them, hey, you know, the water in the bathroom won't stop. They go fix it. That's the relationship. But if I say to them, I want to use this new piece of equipment to do some upper body work, can you help me with that? They're there in a flash. So they're supportive in their relationship. But other than that, it's a self-service kind of relationship. And that is working for them because many people come in, do their thing and leave. One of my neighbors goes at 5:30 every morning, 6 to 6:15. He does his thing. He doesn't care if he talks to anybody. He doesn't care if he has any conversations with anybody. He just wants to go do his thing. And that's what they rely upon, self-service. Okay, so we've taken a look at value proposition, customers, channels, on the relationship side. Now let's look at the other side, and that is the activities. When you think about a business, you got to ask yourself, what are all the things you have to do? For those of you who are on the call that are already in business, you know that it's 24/7. You're like the one-armed paper hanger. You're doing everything. For many years, the only two things I had done outside of my wife, who was my business partner, and I, was graphic design, slide development, and accounting. Now, I used to do all the data input into QuickBooks, but I had a bookkeeper come in every other month and spend time going through our books and making sure that everything tied together to make sure that it worked, so that I didn't get stuck with a big tax bill at the end of the year because the tax accountant couldn't figure it out. So you list all the activities that it takes in order to operate your business. So what are the unique activities in your business? If one of the people on here is a kennel, well, the activities are you have a customer service person at the desk that greets people and checks them in and gets valuable information. You have technicians, you have people who work in the kennel, you've got people who walk the dogs. So you want to think about all the different kinds of activities. You got marketing communications people, social media people, people that support you and are part of your organization or are supplemental to your organization. But understanding all the activities so you can decide what you're going to do yourself and what you might have other people do. Now, those of you who are already in business know there are two things that the owner of a business must do themselves. One is be responsible for sales. Now, you might have salespeople out there, but responsible for revenue. And two, cash management. The number one reason why people go out of business is they run out of money. It's even before having no market. They run out of cash. And I can tell you, having been in business for over almost 30 years, there was a time where I ran into that issue. I accepted an opportunity from a client that I never should have accepted, which required a lot of cash. And it also taught me to stay focused on our key business. So what activities provide you with the competitive advantage? And focus on that. And then find other people to do the remainder. Whether it be graphic design, whether it be copywriting, whether it be the accounting, whatever it is. Look at the different activities of your business and decide what it is that you can do best and what you have to do others. So if you look at marketing, you may want to have somebody, a marketing services group, work with you on social media, on brochure development, and all the creative side of the marketing. You need to stay in touch with sales, revenue, delivery, follow-up. These are all different elements of a business that you need to look at and say, okay, who's going to do what in my model? In Planet Fitness, they're established fitness centers, and they have people staffing those centers. And they're creating an inclusive environment that the people on site do. Beyond that, it's fairly well defined. Now, many of us have partners. In our business, our partners were exhibit builders. They would build an exhibit for somebody, and then they would either refer them to us for training and measurement, or if in fact they would build an exhibit for an excess of $100,000 or $150,000, they would get training free as a part of a partnership. And then we would sell measurement and have a referral fee. So you want to think about, who are your partners? These are people that help you expand your sphere of influence. Now, your bank is your partner because they provide not only financial support, but also they're a key resource in thinking through and helping you plan your business, because they have a broad base of businesses they serve, and therefore they are there as a resource. Your suppliers are partners. They might provide you with a line of credit, or they may help you find additional new products that you can offer to extend your product lines. Your shippers. And most people don't think of shippers as a partner, but you can't believe how much information they have and knowledge they have from just being exposed to other businesses. So what you want to think about is that there are strategic alliances where you're linked to others. Well, marketing services agency, ad agencies were partners of ours because they didn't offer training or measurement. You might have a joint venture where you go together. We had one where we went to a major pharmaceutical company with an exhibit builder as a joint venture. Sometimes even your competitors that are not direct competitors can be partners. So think in terms of, how can you get the job done by linking with others that have mutual interests, mutual missions, but not in conflict, and it can be support of what you're doing. Now, when you think about Planet Fitness, their manufacturers, their equipment manufacturers are partners of theirs. I recently read that many of the Planet Fitnesses are getting new equipment. Their partners are saying to them, you can generate more business if you have the most up-to-date treadmills and up-to-date ellipses and the most up-to-date bicycles. So they're partners. The fitness apparel brands are partners. And the maintenance service providers are partners, because if you link with them, the more equipment you have up, the more people feel that this is a quality organization. So when you think about partners, you got to ask yourself, who are they? What can I acquire from them in the way of knowledge, in the way of shared experiences? And looking at them as a way of cultivating your business and extending the reach of the business. So if you look at the activities and the partners, then you have to ask, say, what kind of resources do you need in order to undertake your business? Well, sometimes you want to look at finance because sometimes you need working capital. I just talked to somebody this morning that's moving into a new retail location and she needs a line of credit. I talked to somebody the other day that wants to expand their print business into doing print on apparel, and they need investment for machinery, screen printing machinery. When we started our business, I took money out of our savings account and used it. I bootstrapped it. Now, it's very interesting. We went 3 months before we've got our first client, and I was wondering how long that $16,000 was going to last. And we got our first client, and then it started rolling. I never touched it again. So you want to think about the needs of your business and understand what kind of resources you need in order to move forward. What kind of physical location do you need? Now, I thought everybody in business, because the 15 years before we started our business, I worked in corporate America. I had an office. I went to the office every day. I had a plant. I went to the plant every day. I thought, hey, I'm in business. I got to have an office. So I went and rented an office. Not one person in an entire year ever came to see me. Because after we started, we realized all of our business was at trade shows and events or at the location of our clients' offices. So we eliminated it after a year, updated the rooms above our garage, and became our office. If we needed to meet somebody, we met someplace at a third party location. So you have to understand, what are the resources you need? What do you specifically have to have in order to make this work? I mentored a husband and wife who made dog treats. They grew all the product that they use for their dog treats on their property, but they couldn't meet the needs that their retailers had with the equipment they had. So they designed a business plan in order to acquire $5,000 to buy a new piece of equipment to renovate their barn so they could house the equipment and move forward. They realized what their needs were, what their resources were, how they had to satisfy their customer base. And there's also human resource. What do you need in order to make this thing work? Because many times you got the idea, but it takes other people to make it work. Now, the resources are human, financial, physical, and intellectual type resources. We've talked about a number of these, but human may be knowledge. It may be that you are not knowledgeable enough in order to position yourself legally to be in business. So you go get a lawyer. Skills, it may be that you have the skills, but you don't have the certifications you need in order to accomplish the task. So you go to the Cape Cod Community College and get a certification. So it may be financial. And you sit down with David and Jeff and let them understand your needs so they can help you figure out how to fill those needs. Or maybe physical or intellectual. You've designed the greatest thing since the thermos bottle. So you need a trademark or you need a patent. So these are the resources you have to look at in order to make your business successful. Well, the resources that Planet Fitness relies upon is their gym facilities and their brand reputation. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where most people start getting confused, and that is the projections of financials. What are your costs? What are the most important costs in your business? What are the fixed costs? What are the variable costs? How do your costs function relative to growth of your business? So when you look at doing a launch budget, and that's what most of you will look at as you're starting a business, what are the things you have to have? Do you have to have an office? Do you have to have brick and mortar retail space? Do you have to have equipment and machinery? What is it that you can start with that is the minimum to get it going? Remember, and I used to have a sign above my desk. In fact, I probably still have it downstairs in my man cave. Happiness is positive cash flow. So look at what are your costs and what is it going to take in order to start this business? And secondly, what are your costs going to be as you scale the business? How will they change as you move forward? So when you look at Planet Fitness, they've got real estate expenses, staff salaries, equipment costs, operating expenses as a core. What are your expenses going to be? Now, the flip side of that is, where are you going to get your revenue? What are your revenue streams going to be? Now, we had a multitude of revenue streams. We had live training. We had online training. We had self-paced training. We had quantitative measurement. We had qualitative measurement. We had on-site measurement. We had measurement software. So you need to look at what are all your revenue streams and how do they play into the cost base? When you think about revenue, you also have to think about pricing. And pricing is a whole strategy unto itself, and we could do a whole webinar on pricing. But when you look at revenue, you've got to look at where do you start? Where do you go? How are you going to get there? What's your crawl revenue? What's your walk revenue? What's your run revenue? What will that look like over 2 years? And based upon your expenses that you did on the left-hand side and your revenue you did on the right-hand side, what's your cash flow? When you start with a bank account and you have revenue coming in and you have expenses going out, what do you have left at the end of each month? And project that out over a 2-year period, monthly or quarterly. But looking at your business from a financial standpoint is really just a dollars and cents interpretation of your plan. It's when you take all those other 7 pieces and put them together, the financial side is the economic interpretation of what you have said your plan is. Where are you going to go? How are you going to get there? What's the outcome? Now, Planet Fitness has membership fees, they retail merchandise, and franchise sales. Those are their revenue streams. Fairly straightforward. Now, there's a component on here that's not on here, and that is competition. And I'm not sure why Alexander didn't do it. And if you want to find the business model canvas, it's on www.strategizer.com. But they left off competition. And part of business planning is, who's your competition? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are their threats? What is their competitive advantage? How are they known in the community? What's their focus? Are they the small business bank? Are they the large business bank? How are they known? So what you want to do is you want to understand them as well as you know yourself. Sun Tzu said it in The Art of War. If you know your competition as well as you know yourself, you will withstand 100 battles. Now that's paraphrasing, but this is what it's all about. You need to understand who they are, what they do, how they sell. When they get a job that you don't get, why'd they get it? Or how are their customers different than your customers? What do they do that positions them in the mind of buyers? So do your competition, your competitive analysis. Lay it out in a grid. What are all the elements that you think are important? And then measure, how do they fit the grid? How do you fit the grid? Now, when you look at the business model canvas without the grid, you're really looking at 4 different elements. You're looking at the business infrastructure, and that is your partners, your activities, and your resources. You're looking at the customer infrastructure, and that is the customers, the customer relationships, and the channel. And then you're looking at the value, the customer value, which is your value proposition, and the business value, which is your cost and your revenue. When you look at it this way, you have then an understandable and usable approach to defining who you are, what you do, what your offer is, and how you can meet customer needs. One of my favorite sayings is Winston Churchill: "They who fail to plan, plan to fail." Whether it's adding a product line extension, buying a business, even selling a business. Sometimes it takes longer and more planning to sell a business than it does to start a business. But planning is a critical part of launching, growing, and sustaining a business. So since I wasn't interrupted with questions, do I assume there are no questions?
I do not have any questions currently posted, so please, if you have any questions for either Middlesex Bank or Mark, please get those into submitted now, and we'll get those read out. And I do apologize for not replying to some of the chats. The settings are blocking me, but yes, we are sending a follow-up with a lot of great information for you to supplement today's presentation. So if anyone has anything, we can take that now. Let me... Oh, we got a hi, Mark. Sorry.
Hello.
Um, let's see. I'll give you guys a few more minutes. Yeah, I don't know. If David and Jeff, is there a part of the business plan that's more important than any other, or is it all equally weighted in the bank size?
I'll be glad to take that one, Jeff. I think early stage companies, I think the financial projections are very important and typically will ask for an income statement, a balance sheet, and a cash flow statement as well. Those are critical, as well as hearing from the business owner themselves about what the business is about and many of the things that Mark spoke about, and not relying on a third party to talk about those. So that we know that you have the knowledge and you have the desire and the wherewithal to go about starting this business or continuing it to grow if it's been around for a few years.
Okay. I do have another one. Any other advice on obtaining initial funding?
Well, I think it's important that you have a third party that takes a look at and helps you with the business plan. Someone like Mark or his colleagues at SCORE, someone that can ask the tough questions. I think very often people start in this process, they have kind of rose-colored glasses, and they don't think about some of the critical items that you need to think about. So that when you come back to a bank or someone else, even if it's an investor, you're pretty serious about what direction you want to head.
Okay. I have a question about tailoring the plan for their specific startup. Get yourself a SCORE mentor. That's how you do that. So I'm going to answer that one for you. Do startups have to do anything above and beyond to solidify their plan?
Above and beyond what? Just the model?
I sorry, that's all that
Yeah, I
says.
think if in fact you are seeking funding, then you and the lender decide what is above and beyond. I have one right now that started with the business model canvas, showed it to a lender. The lender said, this is the kinds of things you need to do, did a plan, a full plan, submitted it. And the lender came back and said, you need to beef up these areas. There's not enough information. So it's a iterative process. I think the thing that you need, if you're not looking for funding, then what you need to do is test it constantly to make sure that the assumptions you made in it hold. Because the assumptions are the basis of what David was talking about, and that's your financials. If you think you're going to get 30% of your revenue from one source and 60% from another source and 10% from a third source, and you find that no, that's not the case after you validate it and you test it, then you need to redo your financials so that they represent that. But I would say it's really one between, if it's one where you need financing, between you and the lender as to what you do above and beyond.
Mark, I'd add to that, you know, it's critical from the planning stage. You touched on it when you were talking about your initial phases of your business, you know, being able to understand when financing might be available versus, you know, equity monies needed either from yourself or a partner or another investor, you know, being aware that you may need to have some seasoning, a little bit of time in the business before financing is available. So having a plan and a backup plan for those scenarios in the early stages of your business can be an important part of the discussion as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. And especially having some of your own equity into the business. I think banks want to see that you have some skin in the game if you're asking them to take additional risk.
Right.
Is the amount of loan that you're allowed to borrow dependent on what your annual revenue is going to be?
I'll say very much so, but it's based on a variety of factors: revenue, income. Mark hit on it very heavily. What your projected cash flows are. That's a key component, regardless of what your ultimate revenue is. And then the other components are, you know, the support of the sponsor, the business owner, both in terms of their financial ability and also or financial capacity, but also their experience in that business or a like business. We see scenarios like that where people are on their second or third business and they've done similar work in the industry. I think all of it plays into the ultimate determination of the loan amount in the financial terms.
Great. How do you get an elusive market analysis?
What's inclusive? Most of the time you do it yourself. You can research, you can go online and look for whatever market you're in. For example, I think we had somebody with a dog kennel. You could go online and do research on dog kennels in Barnstable County. You can go in and do an AI search for dog kennel growth and dog kennels and pet care in Barnstable County. So you can look at gross kinds of analysis that can give you total volume of business, the number of kennels, et cetera, et cetera. You can also go on and do analysis to find out how many pets there are in a particular area. It's amazing what's available out there. Then what you do is you identify all the kennels within a reasonable reach. In other words, if the average person will go 20 minutes to a kennel, then you look at all the kennels within a 20-minute radius of your kennel and then start doing analysis. And it might be, you might do secret shopping of them. You might go online and look at their websites and find out how many runs do they have and what do they offer and what's extra, et cetera. So doing that kind of analysis gives you an inclusive kind of market analysis.
Okay. All right. Well, we've hit the top of the hour. I did have two people ask about a mentor. I will submit your name to directly to Cape Cod chapter, but please understand that we have many great mentors at all the chapter levels. So if you are looking for a great mentor, reach out to SCORE. We want to thank David and Jeff for being on this call today and adding another level to our presentation, and Mark for sharing such great information. Thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you all on our next webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks.